Oh my god, hey, welcome back to my Stagey YouTube channel. If you are meeting me for the first time, hello, my name is Mickey Joe and I am obsessed with all things theatre. I'm a professional theatre critic here in the UK, and not too long ago I went to go and see the Olivier Award winning revival of A Streetcar Named Desire. Now this production first started at the Almeida Theatre in London. It transferred to the Phoenix Theatre, where it played such a limited run that the production has actually closed before I got the time to tell you about it here on YouTube. But I do want to tell you my thoughts anyway. I didn't actually go and review this in a professional capacity because its official gala opening was while I was in New York, but they were doing this whole day seat game of chance thing where you could turn up to the box office, and if you got one of 30 glow sticks and it happened to glow green, then you could get front row tickets, which we did, and we did. So I did get to see the show, and honestly, everything you may have heard about this production is correct. It was such a thrilling piece of theatre. There were so many wonderful elements of it and such fantastic performances that I simply wouldn't be at rest if I didn't come on here and tell you how much I enjoyed it. As brief a run as it had, it is undeniably going to go down as one of the shows of the year in London, so we have to talk about this. And I am also hearing that there might be plans for this production to go to Broadway. That is purely just hearsay and conjecture at this point, but if it goes somewhere, then you heard it here first. So, I'm going to be talking to you all about A Streetcar Named Desire. How did this production still manage to thrill me when we've seen it pretty recently in the UK? What was Rebecca Frecknall's direction like? And what were the performances like? Specifically, how were Patsy Ferran, Anjana Vasan, and Paul Mescal? All will be revealed in today's video. But first of all, many of the talented actors in this production started their training at a very early age, including cast member Gabriela Garcia, who is an alumnus of British Youth Music Theatre, BYMT, who are also the sponsors of today's video. So BYMT are a fantastic youth theatre organisation, and this year they are running some very exciting musical theatre summer camps. These are 6-day residential stays for budding thespians aged between 11 and 17, and they help young people explore and develop their acting, singing, movement, writing, devising, and instrumental playing abilities. Fun fact, almost all of those skills are utilised in the production I'm reviewing today. Working with experienced theatre professionals, participants will create a musical in a week, usually inspired by a theme or a story that excites young people and encourages creative collaboration. And as a result of this, they will also achieve a Grade 6 certificate in musical theatre accredited by Trinity College London. Currently, there are 4 weeks up for grabs in York and London. Prices range from £775 to £675, with a discount available for any young people from a low-income household. Not only that, if you'd like a little bit more information, click on the link in the description of this video where you can find out more about these, and if you use the code MickeyJoe35, you can also get £35 off. Finally, if you enjoyed today's video, make sure to subscribe to my theatre-themed YouTube channel for plenty more videos coming very soon about many other West End and Broadway shows. Now, let's talk about A Streetcar Named Desire. So if you know nothing about A Streetcar Named Desire whatsoever, this is probably one of the great 20th century plays. It's written by Tennessee Williams, and like many of his plays, it's set in the American South. It's all about the dynamic of this trio of central characters. We have Blanche Dubois, our protagonist, this sort of a tragic heroine. She's a Southern belle, and she is arriving at the beginning of the play to the residence of her sister Stella and Stella's husband Stanley Kowalski. The passion that bubbles in Stella and Stanley's relationship is not dissimilar to the instant friction and tension that arises between Stanley and Blanche. As the play continues, it gives way to conversations about mental health and conservative values and prejudices, as well as some very dramatic depictions of domestic abuse. Like I said, this is an iconic play and it has been produced several times. It's been adapted for the film. Marlon Brando is inseparably associated with the role of Stanley Kowalski, but there have been many great performers that have played these roles over the years. Gillian Anderson, not too long ago, played Blanche Dubois on the London stage at the Young Vic in a production that literally wouldn't stop spinning, and it was certainly a bold move for Rebecca Frecknall to want to revive this at the Almeida, especially with that Young Vic revival being as fresh as it was in people's minds. But Frecknall was on a winning streak, having just won the Laurence Olivier Award for Best Director of a Musical for her critically acclaimed production of Cabaret at the Kit Kat Club. Not only that, but she has form with Tennessee Williams before. She directed a wonderful revival of Summer and Smoke that also transferred to the West End from the Almeida a few summers ago. Interestingly, Interestingly, that production starred rising star Patsy Ferran, who ended up stepping into this production of A Streetcar Named Desire at the 11th hour due to the unfortunate indisposition of its originally planned leading lady. Patsy Ferran went on to play the role for the duration of both runs, as well as getting nominated for an Olivier Award for Best Leading Actress in a Play. I do want to talk about Patsy and Paul and Anjana's performances because there is so much to say about all of them. This play really is its performances, but before we do, I want to tell you how good of a job Rebecca Frecknall did. Here is what I thought about the revival. So I'd seen that previous production at the Young Vic, and I was probably dubious going into this one. I loved what Rebecca Frecknall did with Summer and Smoke. It was such a beautifully stylized production with this semicircle of pianos around the back of the stage, and this intimacy and this latent sexuality in the show. But at this point, Streetcar has been done so many different ways, I really didn't know what else she was going to be able to find in it. And the answer is really very interesting, because you might think that in today's climate we really want to talk about the mental health and we really want to talk about the domestic abuse, except for the fact that this play has brought that to the forefront for such a long time. It's been having those conversations for decades now. And the two things that really emerged for me when viewing this text through Rebecca Frecknall's very unique and very careful lens was the relationship between these two sisters. I felt that more strongly in this one than I ever have before, and also the prejudice inflicted upon Stanley Kowalski that motivates much of his rage. And we got all of the same features of the play. We got these sexual tensions, we got these frustrations, we got these moments of passion and of anger and of violence. But in each of those big moments, there were different colours that were illustrated in each of these characters, and that I thought was very interesting. In terms of how this production was actually physically staged, there was a sort of a replica of the Almeida Theatre brought to the stage of the Phoenix Theatre. There was a raised platform at the back, atop which we had a drummer. So this was a performer who plays a small role towards the end of the play, but they have a drum kit on stage, which they play throughout the play, just sort of punctuating dramatic moments. This was used in The Doctor in the West End as well, which also started life at the Almeida. It's amazing how little you notice it when you're engulfed in all of it. I mean, it's like watching a film and having incidental music. If it's good and if it's doing its job, it's not pulling your focus. It's just complementing everything that is happening. And that's exactly what the drumming does in A Streetcar Named Desire. At no point am I watching this thinking, gosh, I wish he'd stop doing all of that drumming. It gives the production a sense of a pulse, and it's a very easy way to just steadily increase tension. It's an incredibly clever tool for the production to use. The actual playing area was this slightly raised square in the middle of the stage. People walked around the outside of it an awful lot, but with relatively little scenery. That became the very small residence shared by Stella, Stanley and Blanche. Now, if her last three productions have taught me anything, it's that Rebecca Frecknall's forte is to create this tight, claustrophobic arena and have these wonderful exchanges between actors where they are facing off against each other, be it in a dramatic way, be it in a romantic way. It's the character work that she does that make her production so incredibly engaging. Everything is about the text. Everything is about those performers. For the most part, we're not doing anything too splashy or ostentatious. It is all about the intention. I do want to talk about one moment in particular. There are a handful in this play, out of necessity really, where it comes to such a boiling point that something needs to happen on stage. In a relatively aesthetically minimal production, it's just good sense for us to see something, for us to see a very stylized, brawling fight sequence. And there is something else that happens. Now, this has become quite popular recently. There is a rain curtain used on stage. And what amazes me the most about this is that we got through so much of the play before it was used. And not that I am an Olivier Award winning director, but if you were to give me a rain curtain, I would be using that rain curtain heavily. The restraint, the sheer restraint that Rebecca Frecknall has to have the ability to pour rain in a perfect square around the perimeter of her playing space and not use it until the time is correct to do so for like 40 minutes, it felt like. I honestly just have a lot of respect for that. But there was such symbolism, there was such meaning, the pulling down of the paper lantern over the naked light bulb. Arguably, that moment didn't really have the impact that it could have done, because Patsy Ferran just doesn't really look old enough for that to feel like some sort of tremendous gasp reveal moment. But every part of Rebecca Frecknall's direction felt purposeful and deliberate, and it achieved so much with such subtlety. Now, not everything is staged very literally. You have a scene where Blanche is in the bath and Stanley is becoming frustrated waiting for her to finish, and this is staged by having Patsy Ferran slowly walking around the perimeter of this square stage. This can lure us into a sort of a dreamlike theatrical haze that we are pulled crashingly out of when we have these incredible real violence scenes, when we have Paul throwing furniture across the stage. And I think this staging approach has its benefits. It also has a couple of shortcomings, because I did like how everything was staged. I liked the storytelling of it. What we lacked was the sense of claustrophobia. Yes, they had this tight playing space, but because it didn't have walls, because we didn't have the dividers, we lacked the sense that they were on top of each other constantly, which is referred to many times in the text of this show. It's a big influence on the behavior of these characters, the fact that they can't navigate around this space without crashing into each other. It's the forced intimacy between Blanche and Stanley that catalyzes everything else that's going to happen between them for the rest of the play. If they were sharing a really big house, you probably never would get A Streetcar Named Desire. Or you might, I just think it would take a lot longer to get there. Now, I don't think we necessarily needed the kind of curtain dividers that are talked about in the script, or that we needed walls necessarily, but I think more could have been done with lighting or with staging to just sort of minimize and give this very cramped idea. It felt a little bit too open and a little bit too spacious. I think because of having all of the space around the square stage, it felt like it wasn't nearly as claustrophobic as I wanted it to feel. On the other side of that is the great benefit of this staging, where it does just focus you so much on the actors and on their performances and on their facial expressions and on their reactions to each other, which are not always straightforward. There are some very complex and multi-layered emotions going on in this play. There are a lot of characters with regrets and with uncertainties, and you can see all of that because everything else is stripped away so that we can just purely focus on the relationships between these characters. None of which would be as satisfying as it is if it wasn't for the fantastic performances. So let me tell you about the wonderful actors in this production. So first of all, I want to say the way that these three were nominated for awards, it was that Patsy and Paul were both nominated as leading actors and Anjana Vasan was nominated as a supporting actress. I think either they should all be leading, or Patsy really ought to be the only leading and the other two should be supporting. Because if Paul Mescal is being called a leading actor for this role, then I don't think Anjana Vasan should be called supporting. It's the disparity between those two I really object to. But let's talk about Patsy first of all. This casting surprised me, and obviously the revival was not built with her in mind. When she was in Rebecca Frecknall's production of Summer and Smoke, she was playing this sexually repressed young woman in the American South. Very different to Blanche Dubois. She had a naivety and an innocence and a youth about her. Blanche is meant to be this glamorous Southern belle whose looks are just beginning to fade. She has these insecurities. Now, canonically, as far as Tennessee Williams is concerned, Blanche is not actually as old as the actresses who often play her. But I think our perspective on age has definitely shifted an awful lot since the time at which the play was written. And so for us to perhaps see Blanche in the same light as she worries other people might see her, and as other people maybe even come to see her, often actresses are cast who are a few years older than Blanche is actually meant to be in the play. But Patsy definitely felt young for this role. She was very much being cast against type here, but she is an exceptional, incredibly versatile, wonderfully engaging performer. Ultimately, on balance, I do think that she was probably miscast in this role, but I will go on to say the fact that Patsy Ferran can give you that mesmerizing and incredible and masterful a performance in a role I think she is inherently miscast in speaks to the enormity of her abilities as an actress. I think we are witnessing really the rise of one of the next great actresses, the likes of Dame Judi Dench and Maggie Smith. We are seeing that right now in Patsy Ferran. She's remarkable and has this completely different take on Blanche, where she's prim and snobbish and lofty. You can feel her thoughtlessness from the beginning, and you wince at the way that she initially behaves towards Stanley and some of the moments where she ignores the concern of her sister because she's so blind to the situation that's unfolding around her. The way she slowly descends in the play is so believable, it's so real, it is mesmerizing to watch. And the shifts in her demeanor between this haughtiness and then this traumatized confrontation with the past. We see her swapping between this sort of vague, emotionally numb state and then these periods of heightened hysteria. She is utterly formidable in this role and convinced me of who her Blanche Dubois was. It's not a way that I'd ever seen the character performed before or ever conceived this character, but she justified her very different interpretation of the role. Opposite her, we have man of the moment, rising star Paul Mescal, who won the Olivier Award for Best Leading Actor in a Play for his performance as Stanley Kowalski in this production. And he is also just wonderful. Stanley Kowalski is a very difficult role to get right, because if you just play the whole thing with brutishness, then it doesn't really work. When he screams out for Stella, you have to believe his anguish and his regret, and you have to understand why she goes back to him. And from the beginning, Paul Mescal has this glint of charm in his eye. He's entitled, and by today's standard we'd call him incredibly toxic in his masculinity and his need to assert his dominance over his household, but we do see a tremendous honesty and affection there for Anjana Vasan's Stella. The other thing we see, and this is maybe my favourite thing in any part of his interpretation of the role, is Stanley Kowalski's insecurity brought so much to the forefront. When he is insulted by Blanche, by her prejudice, and by the racial slurs that she levels against him, the impact that that has on him and the way that that motivates his behaviour for the rest of the play is so tangible and is so clear, because when he explodes with rage, there is such a palpable hurt to it. His feels like the bark and the bite of a wounded dog. Now, I said Stanley Kowalski can't be all brutishness, he also can't be all charm, and Paul Mescal's animalistic fury is something remarkable to watch. It's horrifying and it's ghastly, but you can't look away from it. It's like a car crash happening on stage. When he is asserting his physicality, when he is spitting out food and throwing things around, and in such a controlled way that looks, for all intents and purposes, to be completely out of control, to be completely reckless and furious. He is utterly menacing, utterly terrifying, and captivating in this role. Now, much has been said about those first two performers, but there is another one who makes up this trio. Anjana Vasan as Stella is my favourite Stella I have ever seen in any of the productions I've seen, either live or recorded. I think she's incredible. She also won the Olivier Award for Best Supporting Actress in a Play for this performance, and it was just fantastic. The final moments of the play so often go entirely to Blanche, and she just holds everyone's focus, but a combination of the way that this has been staged to give Stella more of the thrust in this moment, and of how Anjana Vasan utilises that moment, means the whole ending becomes about Stella's reaction to what happens to her sister, and Stella's own anguish at the choice that she's felt she's had to make. From the beginning, she is wise, and she is self-sufficient, and she is willful, more so than I think any we've seen in this role before. She makes bold acting choices which furnish her very much as one of the three players in every part of this production. It is so much about this trio and so much about the relationship between her and Blanche. If you weren't so drawn in by Patsy Ferran's speeches, you could spend the entire time watching the heartbreaking reactions of Anjana Vasan as Stella, as she's slowly realising what it is that she's seeing in these situations. But those have been my thoughts on the most recent revival of A Streetcar Named Desire. I have every hope that this production might resurface in some way. I would love for it to drive on over to Broadway. I think it would do very, very well in New York. Thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope you have enjoyed. If you did, make sure to subscribe to my theatre-themed YouTube channel for many more reviews coming very soon about shows in the West End and on Broadway. I hope that everyone is staying safe and that you have a stagey day. For 10 more seconds, I'm Mickey Joe Theatre. Oh my god, hey. Thanks for watching, have a stagey day. Subscribe!